Hello, everybody. This is Amelia Vogler, grounding and energy medicine specialist, and your host of the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. Today, I'm speaking with Kim Chestney, who's the author of 3 books: Radical Intuition, A Revolutionary Guide to Using Your Inner Power; The Psychic Workshop, cool, a complete program for fulfilling your spiritual potential; and the upcoming book, which I am personally jazzed about, The Illumination Code. Kim is also the founder of IntuitionLab, an international school dedicated to awakening humanity's innate intuitive nature. And she's been teaching intuition development for over 20 years. So welcome in, Kim.
Oh, thanks for having me, Amelia. It's so wonderful to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have a fun conversation. So I want to start with, how did you get started with intuition? Like, how was this birthed in your consciousness and in your story?
Well, it's so funny that there's a great story that I'm finally telling in my upcoming book. I sort of danced around these personal things in my past book, but this one I'm like, you know what? I want to. Everyone asked me that. I was like, how did this come to be? You know, how did this whole process unfold in your life? And really, I think it's the result of, my childhood. I had some experiences with intuition and some sort of extraordinary experiences that did not fit in with our understood view of physics and reality. And ultimately, it culminated when I was living in England, and I had my palms read, and the woman told me a date and a time where I was going to be in a foreign courtroom 4 years in the future. Long story short, sure enough, and that date and that time, I ended up on jury duty.
Wow.
so,
I'm so glad
so
it was just jury duty. That
yeah,
story
yeah, yeah.
could
I
have
know.
gone a few ways.
I was freaked out about that too. I was like, court. I was like, what's going on? But then I didn't really take it seriously, I think, too much when she told me, but I always had it in the back of my mind. So when it happened, I was like, it really felt like a sign to me to follow up on all the other things that personally with my own intuition I had been experiencing, because finally I had witnessed something that was undeniable. So I think it fostered within me a curiosity to understand, and something that actually became a passion in my life because it was so much a part of who I am that I really needed to understand it. And then also I thought, if she can do that, why can't we all do that? Right? She was just a regular old person. She wasn't, she didn't have magical superpowers or anything. So then I realized that, yeah, intuition is actually something that we all have. It's just a faculty that we've kind of let go by the wayside, most of us, mostly because it's been conditioned out of us as children. So that's sort of the impetus behind all of the books I've been writing and the research I've been doing and all the work we do at IntuitionLab, is really understanding that meaningful, intuitive, imaginative aspect of our thinking process.
Cool. What a cool story. So how did you develop your intuition? After you had that kind of aha or that awakening, what was that? What was your education like, or your kind of your training process, if you
Yeah.
will?
Yeah, great question. So when I was in my 20s, when all this stuff sort of started to brew, when I was in college and I started having all of these different extraordinary experiences and awakenings, and I knew that I had a calling to understand this and learn about it. So I started going to intuition development classes, just like the ones 30 years later that I'm doing online. We didn't have computers back then, but we'd go and sit around in circles and practice together. And it's a funny story. We would trade intuition readings at night, and I would always get excited to go in and get mine. And one night a woman said, you're going to be writing a book next year. This time you're going to have a book out. And I said, again, I was like, that's not going to happen. I wasn't even on my radar screen. I was a graphic designer at the time. I was still in my late 20s. Sure enough, within the next 4 months, I got a book deal. And that was my first book, The Psychic Workshop. And it was published and sold 25,000 copies. It was unbelievable.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing. So you started in groups and doing kind of sharing readings
mhm,
together.
mhm.
Um, how do you think that process of learning in a physical group like that is the same or different from some of the classes that you teach in IntuitionLab?
Yeah, I think each one has its benefits. And it was really nice back then in some ways, getting to meet people in person and doing things with touch, like with intuition, like touching and being close in space with people is advantageous sometimes because you can, practice with psychometry and fun things like that. But really, I've found that I really prefer the online teaching just because, for one, I can reach so many more people, and we can invite people in from all over the world, and it's not just people in your town, right? So you get to meet all kinds of interesting people. And also, what we know about intuition, and I talk about in my new book, the Illumination Code, is that it works in the non-local field. So it's not something that requires you to be there in person. Intuition is one of those things like Reiki and other healing modalities where we can actually tap into that field that connects us all. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's any less potent than if we were right there. And that's really exploring that in physics and how non-locality is an accepted, really a revolutionary development in quantum physics within the last 50 to 100 years. That understanding that gives us a way of accepting intuition as it's not something that's necessarily so woo, it's something that's really possible and plausible.
So, Kim, what's the definition that you use for, say, like the difference between intuition versus psychic?
So for me, so in radical intuition, that's sort of the question I set out to answer is, what exactly is intuition? Right? Because my first book was psychic development, because that was the pathway back then. 30 years ago, there really wasn't any other pathway to intuition. It was psychic development. And then we started realizing, yeah, everybody can develop their psychic abilities, right? And now that's branching out, and people realize that actually intuition is part of everything we do. It's not just a spiritual practice. It's not just a woo thing like we've sort of labeled it for so many years. And I work in tech. I spent 20 years working in technology and innovation with creativity, some of the biggest technology companies in the world. And what happened is I started noticing these tech companies talking about intuition. You go into meetings, you're like, oh, this has to be intuitive. And we know that if you want to innovate, I work with startups, I coach startups. One of the key factors you need to create a good business and to sell and to have people engage in your product is to create something new and different and ingenious. And these are all qualities of intuition. Einstein talked about intuition. Steve Jobs talked about intuition. So we've started to realize that it's something that not only applies to our personal lives, it applies to our business, it applies to our relationships, it applies to everything that we do. If we use our intuition as a complementary thinking faculty to our intellect, we do everything better. It really is that secret sauce to our inner wisdom and the genius that holds.
What do you think the relationship is between intuition and innovation?
Yeah, so I really think it's really important. I really feel like innovation, like to answer your first question, is psychic development is a facet of intuition, right? So it's a byproduct of having a fully developed intuition. You start to have those experiences. And it's the same with something like being visionary or being a good leader or being innovative. These are byproducts of that intuitive way of thinking, which is tuning into that sort of spark of genius within you instead of following people in the outside world. And that's a really, really big difference when it comes to innovation. If you want to create a new product, you want to create something that's impactful. You don't go around following what everybody else is doing because they're already doing it. Why would you do that? You look within and you say, what is that unique thing that I can bring, that I can offer that's different? And that's how intuition ties in with vision and bringing new life into the world and like sort of birthing the future.
Cool. That's interesting. And in the book, radical intuition, that phrase, you say it's kind of going beyond the limits of our thinking mind. And this idea that we have an opportunity to expand our consciousness and bring the world together, like innovate, like we've never seen before. So what of this phrase, radical intuition, what does that refer to in your framework or mindset or perspective?
Yeah. So, when we decided to call the book Radical Intuition, we thought it was really fitting, because when we decide to truly follow our intuition and, march to the beat of our inner wisdom instead of following the world, it does create a radical change in your life. It's a radical new way of living. And it's part of the tide that's happening right now in society. And for so long, we've been living by the knowledge systems that people have fed us. We have been learning cause and effect thinking, materialism, empiricism, all that stuff. But now we've sort of gotten to the edge of information, and there's so much information that we realize we have to use some other faculty. And especially with the rise of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, because that is very much tied in to intuition-like behavior. Yeah. So instead of following, the cause and effect stuff, intuition knows stuff in an instant. It can travel from the question to the answer without any of that stuff in between. And so I think it's so important in the future to understand that reconnecting with this sort of atrophied part of our brain, which is, our creative side, our imaginative side, our intuitive side, bringing that back to life, letting it complement our very smart intellectual minds. Mm-hmm. And then we really have that sort of full human being, which is what we want to be. That's our ultimate goal, is to be using all of our brain to be complementarily thinking with our intuitive mind and our intellectual mind. And that is what's going to bring us together. It's going to break down the walls, because with our intuition, we have empathy. We have the ability to reconnect and be one in our hearts and souls. So it's the human aspect that we start to miss when we go too far out into our heads.
And is that connected to your idea of being true to yourself? Kind of this, because I know that you presented this beautiful idea that being true to yourself is revolutionary. And so how does that, is that what you're talking about, this emergence of self and the honoring of that?
Absolutely. That was fun. That was our one meme that went viral when the book came out. It was, to be true to yourself is the most revolutionary act. And really what that means is, so often we live our lives and we live it, according to what other people think we should be doing, or what everybody else is doing, or what society says we should do. All of the different things that have conditioned us over the course of our life. There's so much of it that we're not even aware, but returning to ourselves, to our whole self and our true self, is about breaking down those conditioned thoughts and feelings and realigning with that one solid abiding truth within us. And that is our intuition. Our intuition connects us with our ultimate truth, our whole self. As Paramahansa Yogananda says, it's the soul's power of knowing God. Whatever word you have for God, truth, source, spirit, whatever that is, intuition connects you to that. So to me, it's the most important thing in the world. That's why I'm here.
I love that. I'm so happy that you're here. So you go into detail about the 4 kind of types of intuition: the healer, the sage, the visionary, the mystic. Could you tell us, introduce those types to us?
Absolutely. So sort of on that quest to answer the question of what intuition is, the best way, that framework really that I could create to understand it, so that everybody could get an idea of the array of applications that intuition brings into our life, was the model of body, mind, heart, and spirit, right? So the Jungian sort of model, the 4 elements, it really was a great demonstration of the different ways we experience intuition. So for instance, the first one, body, right? So, and they're not really types of intuition, although I use that word, they're more like pathways, right? Because there really is only one intuition. There's that bridge to the super consciousness, and that's what intuition is, but it flows through different pathways. So intuition of the body, right? And the archetype for that is the healer, right? Someone who's very much in touch with their body and their body's energies, which is great for this community, because I'm sure there's a lot of healers out there watching this right now. But so how have you felt intuition in your body? Have you, all different kinds of ways? Maybe when you're scared, you would get little chills up your spine if something didn't feel right. Or, maybe you crave something, a certain food or something that has vitamins that your body needs. Or, maybe you even just have different sensations or feelings that ways your body's speaking to you. So there's so many different ways that intuition uses our body to relay information and to guide us. So that's the first type, and it's really, really powerful for healers, for people who use their bodies and need to understand what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and really tuning into the chakras and all of the stuff that comes along with that, because intuition is very much tied in with that. And then the second type is the intuition of the mind, right? And that's our inner guidance system. You always hear intuition being referred to as our inner GPS, right? So that's the part of you that makes decisions and chooses and uses that sort of intuitive thinking mind, right? It's your inner wisdom. It's your inner, like, that truth and knowingness in your head. So that's really helpful. The archetype for that is the sage. So if you're a teacher or a counselor or a guide or someone who really is out there to lead others and share wisdom, that's a type of intuition that you probably use pretty often. I mean, we all use all these types, but some of them are more open than others with people. And then the third type is intuition of the heart, right? And that's our feeling intuition, right? That's how intuition moves us through resonance and empathy and all of the different ways that we have those soul connections with people. So it's also very creative. That's where creative intuition comes, and inspiration and getting in that flow of like creating new things in the world, innovation, leadership. Intuition of the heart moves you to be out there and transform and lead other people to do the same thing. So it's really beautiful. And that's why the archetype for that is the visionary, right? Because it's someone who's out there changing and creating and following their passion, right? It's not our little heart where we follow our small feelings or our wants and our needs. It's that sort of higher heart that gets out there and changes the world through going out and making our mark. And then the fourth type of intuition of the spirit, that's where we get into that real sublime connection of intuition and the universe and God and all of the different ways that it can manifest as spirituality and metaphysical experiences and really communion with the divine. And the archetype for that is the mystic. So if you're a mystical person, if you like to explore the new frontiers of inner space, well, that's probably the type of intuition that you're naturally adept at. So yeah, in the book you can there's a little quiz in there. You can take a little quiz to see which type is your natural type, but we all sort of have a little peppering of this and that.
Cool. I love the idea of those different pathways. I can, as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about my kind of my life on the planet this time and going, oh, I identify different moments in my life where I was connected through in those different or in and through those different pathways at different times, just depending on who I was with or what I was doing in my life. So I can feel the aliveness in your invitation to start looking at intuition through these different pathways or different aspects. One of the terms that you also talk about in your book is well, you were talking about the information age and how it's coming to an end. And so I think that our listeners would love to hear, from she who intuits and is so, deeply immersed in this study, like what is coming next? How do we prepare for that? What is what's the story that's being written into the future?
Right. And such an important question. I really focused on a lot of that work when I was working in the technology space, because it's a big question. Mm-hmm. And, where is all of this stuff going to go? And, living in a time we're approaching this singularity, right? With the point where machines are actually smarter than we are. This is a big shift, especially when also things like quantum computing are coming involved. Mm-hmm. So I think that, our understanding of reality is going to shift with these developments in technology and really in the way that our culture is moving forward. And that's why it's so important that intuition is a part of this process, right? It's because intuition in a lot of ways is what keeps us human. It keeps that human connection, right? So far,
I love that.
I haven't seen any intuition in machines yet. They don't have that ability to connect with the universe and the non-local field and God and their creator, all that stuff, they're still reacting to the programs that we build into them. That, may change, especially when we start working with quantum computers. I feel like that's a different conversation, but where we're at, we're still living in this sort of binary world of ones and zeros, and they haven't reached that threshold yet. But then we are going to have to face things of like, what is life? What is consciousness? What does it mean to be human and alive? And that's going to make a big change in the way that we all live our lives. So it's more than ever, I think it's important to bring intuition into that conversation and to keep our heart front and center, because that's what's going to allow us to move forward in a centered way, in a way that keeps people united and together instead of divided and opposing each other.
I love that, Kim. And your invitation to think about kind of the machines as being smarter than we are, but lacking that more mystical connection, kind of reminds me of the other day I was playing around on the Chat GPT AI. So I threw in a quantum physics article and I said, hey, can you summarize this for me? And so it did. And I went, oh, that was pretty good. And then I said, can you write me that summary like a non-rhyming poem? Oh, it had no idea it had no idea.
Like, that's a great question.
It didn't know how to not rhyme. It didn't know it. So I was just kind of testing out that like, how do you take this very concrete yet mystical topic? So I saw potential there and was just kind of said, hey, how abstract can you get this, and artful? So I think I stumped it. But that's what I was kind of reminded of that while you were talking, going, oh, also there is artfulness, perhaps seeding the creativity that you've been sharing with us.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that term artfulness, because I do think, intuition is all, very much deeply tied to the arts and artfulness, right? And so I really love that you made that connection. So keeping that artfulness in the things that we innovate and the things that we create, and having that human spirit being a part of that conversation, I think will be really valuable moving forward.
Yeah, I can just feel your heart meeting my heart. And as I'm saying that, I'm hearing the rhyme of art and going, wait a minute, all of these little particles are connecting right there in front of me. So Kim, tell us a little bit about IntuitionLab. What's in there? How do we find you? Like all the stuff, because you've just got amazing resources out there.
Yeah, so IntuitionLab, it's really a global intuition development school. It's sort of been my sandbox for experimenting and creating. And that's really what we do is, we have a variety of online workshops and programs, and we have a sacred guide program that's a 1-year program where we really immerse ourselves deeply into intuition and see how far within we can go on the journey. So there's a lot of experimentation, there's a lot of group work, which for me I think is so important. Even from my own history, the intuition is something that you get those real validations that you need to trust yourself when you work with other people. It's very hard to get that on your own because you sort of know yourself and it's a subjective experience. But when you start working with other people, you really have the opportunity to say, wow, like I knew something there was no way for me to know, or I felt something that was like unbelievable, right? And those are the things that allow you to start to trust yourself and trust your intuition. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's awesome. Kim, I cannot wait to join you in a program over in IntuitionLab. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. I think you covered an extraordinary amount of ground, which I think just sort of speaks to the bigness of your perspective. And I just want to thank you so much for coming in and talking with me today.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. I appreciate your wonderful questions, really insightful talk. Thank you so much for having me here.
Blessings.
To you too.